That wasn't the bottle. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are in the shop and we're going to continue working on the TJ. So you may notice that the TJ is on the lift, and you may can see that the shocks are on, and I do have the ACOS on. So unfortunately I lost about 30 minutes of content working on this Jeep, and in that 30 minutes I installed the front bumper, the winch, the shocks in the front, and the ACOS. So I'll show you what I got here. So you can see I'm running the ACOS on top. I don't have the bump stops in yet, and I am doing a mock-up for the sway bar right there. And you can see these are just the plain Jane, you know, cheapy, rusty shocks. And you can see right here I've got the Motobilt front bumper with the worn VR Evo 10,000 pound synthetic winch, and I've got it all bolted on with grade 8 bolts. So in the video that I lost, what I did was I had to put the winch on the bumper first and then bolt everything on the Jeep as one. And so whenever I realized that I had lost all that footage, instead of taking all that stuff back off and pretending that I was putting it on for the first time, I just decided I was just going to be honest with y'all and say, you know, and tell you that I did lose it. But if I do get the footage back, what I plan on doing is still editing and making a video, but it just kind of be like a Star Wars thing. Like, you know, I will have that video after this one. So now we're going to try to get this 231 transfer case underneath the Jeep. You got it? Yep. So on the front of this transfer case, there are 6 studs that you have to mate to the transmission, and it is a 9/16. And what we're doing now is just going through and just tightening them up, and we're not just, you know, tightening one side, we're just jumping back and forth because we want this to seat properly. And you can see we got the gasket right there. So, and of course this one's got this super shorty slip yoke eliminator. So yeah, should be good. So now what we're working on is getting these disc brakes on the 8.8, getting these set up, and we're trying to figure out exactly where we want to run this hose, the brake line right here. And we can't put those on until we get the shocks on in the rear. And I can't get the shocks on in the rear until I lower it down, and I can't lower it down until I get these brackets out of the way. I'll show you these brackets right here. So these are the brackets right here that I totally forgot to cut off. What was happening was when the weight of the Jeep was on the suspension, this was contacting each other and it wasn't giving me a proper ride height. So I'm gonna have to cut those off before I can get the shocks on. And also, I totally installed these backwards. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be flipping this arm completely around. I don't know why or how I did that. I don't know. I'm only human, so. But anyway, yeah, we're trucking right along in this. I'm really excited to get it done. And one more thing before we get back to work, I'll tell you, for some reason, I had to adjust this ACOS just a little bit. It's probably 3/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, somewhere in there. I had to do that to get the Jeep level. and I don't really know why. I'm hoping once I cut those brackets off in the rear, it'll make it level. I'm not sure, but that's kind of what I'm hoping for right now. So if you see, and you know, later on in the video, that ACOS is adjusted, I just wanted to get my ride height perfect for right now in the front. So hopefully whenever I figure out what's going on there, I can adjust it back where everything is the same on both sides. But until then, I'm just gonna leave it adjusted for right now. So now that we have those brackets cut off, what we're doing now is we are taking everything on the transfer case and getting it hooked up, the wires, the speedo, the vent tubes, the four-wheel drive linkage right here. And we have to do that before we put that massive rusty skid plate on. And we're also going to be putting the drive shafts in too. So the drive shafts that we're going with were the ones that came in that blue TJ that had all the rust and all that nasty rust repair, and that's actually where that transfer case came from. So luckily for us, it had an 8.8 in the rear of it, just like what we're running right here. So we're going to be using this front drive shaft and the rear drive shaft.
Hey YouTube. Hey.
Hey, what's up?
What's up? What's up?
All right, so we're gonna get back to work. All right, so now we're gonna try to get this front drive shaft in, and this is the drive shaft that came out of that blue TJ back there, along with the rear drive shaft, but we're hoping it lines up, even though we got a new Dana 44 axle in the front. Hopefully it's not too long or anything weird. Too long?
Yeah. Is it sitting in there?
Yeah. So it looks like the front drive shaft is going to be too long. So what we're going to have to do is get the skid plate on, and that's going to be holding the transmission and transfer case. These bolts that are going into 8.8 even say 8.8. All right, so we got a shop update for you. I'll show you what we got going on. So I did end up flipping these bars around the lowers. I have the adjustable end at the frame side instead of the axle side. I don't know why I did that, but and also is we actually got this drive shaft to expand just enough so that it goes into the yoke on the back of the transfer case and on the flange on the 8.8. And you can see we got the skid on, and also something that I forgot to go over is we used this factory mount. You can see the bolts coming through the bottom of this pan. What the light is on right now is actually the factory piece off the factory skid plate. And you can see we needed that to be able to put the transmission mount on. And everything else is lined up pretty good. It kind of sucks that the front drive shaft needs to be shortened, but it's all good. So what we're probably going to do now is I'm going to get the rear shocks started at the top here, and they go in the factory location. And I don't know exactly where I want the shock mount to live. So what I'm going to do is get the shocks at the top and get the Jeep back on its own weight, and that way I can make sure that it's going to clear the gas tank right here. So it is kind of tight fitment through here, and once I do that, we can start hard mounting these brake lines on the 8.8, and then we can bleed the brakes and we'll be one step closer. So instead of putting the tires on and lowering this Jeep down on its own weight, I just put a jack up under the rear axle here, and then I have my safety jacks on the front and on the rear. That way I can safely jack up on the rear axle and kind of just do a reenactment of where the Jeep axle will be whenever it's on its own weight, so I can get the shock in and figure out where I need to weld this tab on. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get this rear shock up in the factory mounting spot and see kind of where it's going to be welded on. So these are the brackets that we're using for the rear shocks. And the reason that we're using them is because I had them laying around my shop, to be honest with you. So what I'm going to do is, you can see here, they are a flat mounted shock bracket. So what I'm going to do is, because the axle is obviously tubular, is I'm going to put a curve inside of this. That way it seats on the axle better. Now that I have some heavy tacks on this shock mount, I'm actually going to remove the shock, and I may just kind of get it out of the way, like right here. That way I can fully weld all the way into it. So now that I have some decent welds on this shock tab, I'm going to go to the passenger side. I'm going to let this cool off a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to come finish doing some more welds on it. But I'm going to start doing the shock mount on the rear side here, or on the passenger side. All right. It is a chilly night in the shop tonight. The thermostat says 42 degrees. I got my heat going, and we are going to try to work on this TJ a little bit. So the last thing that y'all saw was me welding up the shock brackets on this 8.8. So now I'm going to get the shocks actually inside of the mounts there and get some bolts in them so I can check them off my list. So I'm going to be using some grade 8 hardware. And a locking nut on the end of that. So I'm going to be taking 2 3/4 inch wrenches and tightening this up. So now I can mark off the rear shocks. Alright, so now that I have the rear shocks marked off, my plan is to try to figure out these brake lines, exactly where I want to put these. I'm thinking something like this. Kind of looking like my only option that kind of keeps them tucked up, because that way when I'm going down the trail, the brake line is protected by this mount right here. So that'll probably be where I'll be putting this bracket right here. I may try to put it do something like that. May try to bend this down. I don't know. We'll see what I can come up with. So what I did was I took one of these brake line brackets, and I had some, I can't remember where I got these from. I think it was from Barnes 4-wheel drive, but anyway, they were angled like this, but I put them in my vise and flattened them out. And my plan is to just lay them down right there on the axle bracket or the coil spring bracket on the axle, and put a couple of tack welds just to hold that in. And that way this brake line can come up through this just like that. And then you take one of these clips and hold it down just like that. And you know, obviously it'll be clicked in, but then the hard line off of the axle will screw into this. So I'm going to clean this up right here where it's got paint on it. That way I can put some good tack welds on this, and we'll get it tack welded up. So for this tab that I flattened out, I am thinking of putting it right here on this perch for the spring and just bringing it out just somewhere like right there. That way I have plenty of room and not going to be curling the brake line too tight or anything like that. And then I'll have plenty of room to take everything to the hard line. So what I'm going to do now is clean this area up right here and get it ready to weld. So in order to get in there and sand, I'm going to be using this this belt sander, and this thing is awesome. I got it from Harbor Freight. So I'm just going to run this in there, and I'm going to adjust it a little bit. And I'm going to run this in there and clean up the paint for the welding. Alright, so as you can see, I have the little tab welded on, and so now I'm going to go to the passenger side and go and do the same thing on that in the same location. Alright, so I have the new tab all painted, and I'm going to run the brake line up, and I'm also going to be putting the clips on. So they just go on just like this. So just like that. Now I'm going to be taking some hard lines that I have. I'm going to be going from this brake line right here. I'm going to try to get it around this spring and this shock so that it can meet the block from the brake line coming from the actual Jeep body. The block will be mounted on top of the axle truss, and there will also be another hard line coming from the opposite side. So kind of just got to get everything to work together and play nice. That way we actually can get the brakes working on this. So I'm going to try to figure out a good way to route this brake line, and then we'll get that block on. So these brake lines, these are the copper ones right here, so you can kind of bend these, and they're a little more forgiving than like the green ones that you can get. But any big bends that you're going to be doing, you want to use a miniature tube bender, but I think they're actually called line benders. But so we are finishing up on a few odds and ends on the TJ right now, and I have the brake lines all routed on the rear axle. I'll kind of show you what I got here. I just kind of got them looped up going around to the block right there that's going up to the main line, the main hard line on the Jeep. So what we're doing is he's torquing down the transmission pan, and then we're gonna lower the Jeep down and actually start putting some fluids in this thing. Kind of show you my brake lines on the passenger side. They're not pretty, but they'll work for now. And I've got to get some rubber mounts to hold on the truss right here, just so I just have something more secure on top. All right, so it is a new day in the shop, and you can obviously see that the Jeep is lowered down. It does have all 4 tires on it, and now we are starting to add fluids. As you can see, I did spill some transmission fluid, so we're soaking that up. And now I'm gonna start bleeding the brakes, and we're gonna drive this thing today. It is coming out of my shop on its own power. It's gonna happen. So I went ahead and put a battery in here, and I don't have the cables ran the way I want them to. I just wanted to make sure that it would start up. We have some new heater hoses. We have new radiator hoses. I did put some coolant in. I've got to get a air cleaner, and let's see what else. I have to change the oil too, but no, that can wait. And like I said, I'm gonna be rerouting these cables. I want to, tidy them up and make sure they're not going to rub up against anything. This is actually the cable for the winch. And like I said, I just want this to be, whenever you pop open the hood, everything is just nice and organized. And I just kind of got, like I said, I'm going to be changing it, but I just wanted to make sure that it would start up. And, oh, there's some transmission fluid that I spilled. Whoops. Always use a funnel. All right, so I'm gonna start working on these brakes. So before I start bleeding the brakes, I will say whenever you are bleeding the brakes on your own vehicle, you always want to start at the caliper or the drum that is furthest away from the brake reservoir. That way you make sure you get all the air bubbles out all the way through. Just kind of a little helpful tip. Good. We are about to test fire this thing and make sure that the brakes and everything work just right, make sure there's no leaks, and hopefully we're actually about to back this thing out for the first time under its own weight. Under its own power. What Well, the trial run went pretty good. We had one radiator hose leak that he's working on now, and I believe there was something was hitting back here. We got to figure out what that was. But other than that, it drives really well. Obviously the exhaust needs to be fixed because it's just cut off. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. I really appreciate y'all watching us getting this Jeep out of the shop for the first time. So we are out here enjoying this beautiful sunset here in Deep Run, North Carolina. So the Jeep still needs front sway bar, rear sway bar, the electrical, turn signals. I need to figure out what I'm going to do about the shocks that are bottoming out. I may have to put in smaller shocks or shorter shocks in the rear. There's plenty of things to figure out, but I believe this Jeep has turned out pretty daggone good. But anyway, guys, I really appreciate y'all watching. Make sure that you are subscribed so that you don't miss out on any of the future content on this build. We will be taking this build on some pretty cool adventures here shortly once we get it all done. And then after this one is done, I have another Jeep that we're going to be comparing it to, so make sure that you don't miss out on that. But anyway, thank you all for watching. We'll see you on the next one. I was supposed to say something.